We have reached the end. Halloween Ends, that is, 2022's newest installment to the Halloween franchise, and potentially the end of the series. I don't know if that's true. This movie, to me, wasn't everything I expected it to be. It's not quite what I wanted to see in this movie, but it's okay. I was disappointed with how it was going at times, but I think it ends up in a pretty good place depending on your perspective of it. So let's begin taking a look at Halloween Ends. As always, please be aware that this review will be containing spoilers. I want to emphasize that point especially because this movie just came out and still in theaters. Halloween Ends picks up 1 year after the previous movie. It is Halloween night 2019, and Corey has been hired to babysit a kid named Jeremy. His parents are going out to a Halloween party. Jeremy decides to play a prank on Corey by locking him in the attic 4 floors up, and this is where things go bad. Jeremy kicks the door open to try to get out of the attic, and it knocks Jeremy over the railing, and he falls to his death 4 feet below. Corey's arrested, although later would be acquitted of this crime, and we pick up 3 years later, 4 years from the previous movie. And we hear Laurie telling us how the events of the last movies have affected the town. Everybody is now paranoid and scared and not sure when something else bad is going to happen. She also tries to say how she's trying to move on. She's writing a memoir about her experiences with Michael and the whole murders of 1978 and 2018. And she bought a new house that she's living in with granddaughter Allison. We catch back up with Corey. He gets a motorcycle as a gift at his job, and he goes to a gas station. As he's leaving, he has an altercation with some teenagers who want him to buy beer for them, but he refuses, so they give him a hard time. Laurie breaks it up, and then he cuts their tire with Laurie's knife as she drives him away. Laurie then introduces Corey to her granddaughter Allison when she takes him to the medical clinic to get his hand stitched up that he had cut by breaking a bottle in his fist. Allison and Corey seem to hit it off a bit and eventually make a date through text messages to go to a Halloween party at a local bar. Laurie sees Officer Hawkins at the grocery store and they're continuing to hint at a potential romance building between them as they did in the previous movie. And Laurie has a run in with a survivor from the previous movie. It's a woman who was her neighbor, who Michael had stabbed in the neck with a fluorescent light tube. She managed to survive that attack. Next, we see Allison and Corey at the bar. They start to have a good time, but just as he's enjoying himself, he runs into the mother of the boy he had accidentally killed 3 years prior, and he feels uncomfortable and has to leave. Allison follows him outside and he's upset and says he's not her project to fix. She says she was just trying to have fun with him, but he ends up leaving and walking off. As he's walking home, he has a run in with the teenagers from the gas station earlier and they start harassing him. He tries to defend himself and eventually they push him off a bridge where he falls below. We see him laying there knocked out and we see his body pulled into a drain pipe, kind of starting to get more of a Pennywise and Stephen King kind of vibe with that. But he wakes up inside the drain. He's looking around confused and eventually sees the exit and tries to go out, but he's grabbed by Michael Myers, who was kind of hiding in a hole in the wall. Michael's choking him and staring into his eyes, and he has a flashback of the events of his life recently. And Michael, we see something in Corey's eye starts to change, and Michael lets him go, and Corey escapes outside into the daylight where a homeless man tries to stop him, and Corey stabs the homeless man multiple times, killing him. Corey is immediately acting strange, and he goes back to his house before heading over to Laurie and Allison's house to see Allison. We get an eerie scene where he's standing outside by the bushes staring up at Laurie, kind of reminiscent of the original movie. She comes down and he says he's just there to see Allison, needs to talk to her. He wants to apologize for the previous night and wants to see her. He says he was attacked on the way home and they decide to go on a walk. He, on the walk, says he killed somebody, and for a moment I thought he was referring to the homeless man he had just killed, but no, he was referring to Jeremy, the boy he had killed 3 years prior. He takes Allison to the house that happened and explains the story to her. Laurie immediately seems concerned and she goes to Jeremy's house and talks to Jeremy's mother. We see Allison and Jeremy on a date at a diner later, and another man who's interested in Allison, a Haddonfield police officer, comes up and tries to talk to her. She says she's with somebody, but he keeps pushing, and Jeremy gets upset and tells him they're okay and he wants him to leave. And the other guy gets angry. He begins to follow them as they leave, as Jeremy drops Allison off back at her house, and then he goes forward as the man continues to trail him. He leads him back to the area under the bridge where the drain pipe is, and he grabs the man, attacks him, and lures him into the drain pipe. The man comes in, and we see Michael in the background, and then Jeremy's there. Michael attacks, but Michael seems to be very wounded still 4 years later from the events of the last movie. He's notably limping, leaning over, and doesn't seem to be in full form. Corey gets involved and helps battle the man down and is holding him down and tells Michael to show me how to do it. Michael grabs his knife that he has stashed there, cuts the man's throat, and then begins to stab him multiple times. Notably, Michael seems to be getting stronger as he's stabbing. Corey returns to Allison's house and says he's not sure what's wrong with him. They continue to grow closer together and they go upstairs and do end up sleeping together. And in the morning, he takes back the scarecrow mask that he had worn to the Halloween party previously. And Laurie, still growing more concerned, we see her at a bar talking to Lindsay Wallace, saying that she sees a darkness in Corey's eyes, the same darkness that she saw in Michael's eyes all those years before in 1978. And Jeremy's father is in the bar, and he confirms too that he saw Corey um, walking along the street, and he was going to try to talk to him, but there was something different about him that he couldn't explain either. That he looked different. He wasn't the same kid who had mowed their lawn years before. Corey now goes and starts to try to claim revenge for people that he thinks have wronged Allison. In this case, we see a doctor from the clinic that Allison works at who's constantly rude to her and doesn't treat her very well, arriving with another nurse who had been promoted ahead of Allison, and now we see why, because she's apparently sleeping with the doctor. As the doctor's getting ready and the other nurse goes to take a shower, Corey arrives and he first kills the doctor. He has wrapped a plastic bag around his head and is stabbing him several times. And then he goes after the other woman. She escapes inside and locks him out, but Michael's inside the house and Michael kills this girl, pinning her up against the wall with a knife as he's done to other people in the past. This is interesting here as it seems that Corey and Michael are working together. We then see Corey and Allison on a date. They're riding on his motorcycle and then they go to the radio station and sit on the roof. They're talking about leaving Haddonfield and escaping all the problems they've had there. And they keep referencing burning it down, and he says he'll light the match. They have an altercation with the owner of the radio station, and then they leave. We see Corey get into an argument with his parents and ultimately gets kicked out of the house, it seems. And he wakes up the next morning sleeping in the house that Jeremy, the boy he was babysitting and killed in the beginning of the movie, lived. Laurie's there waiting for him, and she says that he needs to be careful. She warns him that there are two kinds of evil, external and internal, and the internal kind is more dangerous because you might not know it's there. And she says she wants him to leave Allison alone. He says he won't do that. In fact, he at one point says if he can't have her, nobody will. And at one point, he says something odd in this scene. He says, "Do you want to do it or do you want me to?" And I assume he's talking to Michael, although we don't have any indication that Michael's here. But that's what it would seem to indicate, my best guess at this point in the movie. And as he turns back, Laurie has gone. He looks and leaves. He calls Allison and says they need to leave right now. She says she can't because she's working, but he says they need to leave tonight. He asks her to meet him at 9 o'clock, and he says that his her grandmother wants to kill him. We then see an odd thing. He goes to the storage room that Michael's been living in. He goes in and wrestles around with Michael and steals Michael's mask. He then sets off on his big killing spree. Corey does most of the killing in this movie. He does way more than Michael. He steals Michael's masks. He lures the teenagers who have been harassing him to the junkyard that he works at, and he, wearing Michael's mask, begins to kill them one by one. His uncle, who was his employer, is killed in this scene as well, but accidentally when one of the teenagers shoots him trying to shoot Corey. Corey then goes and kills his mother, and then he goes and kills two more people at the radio station. He kills the DJ who had bothered them earlier, as well as the receptionist who was working there. Allison had decided to leave with Corey. She had an argument with her grandmother about it, and she had packed some bags and left. She was waiting for Corey but couldn't find him. And we now are caught back up with Laurie Strode. She's upset, she's drinking, she's looking for Allison, but she seems to be aware that something's going on. She goes up to her office and pretends that she's going to commit suicide, pulls out a gun, and calls in a fake suicide report. But when Corey comes in wearing Michael's mask, he she catches him by surprise, shooting him twice, knocking him down the stairs. At the bottom of the stairs, she's again telling him that he's not going to have Allison, as we hear Allison pull up outside in her car, and he again says if he can't have her, nobody can, and then he stabs himself in the neck with his knife. Laurie pulls the knife out, and Allison walks in just at the wrong moment to make it look as though she had attacked Corey. Allison leaves in anger, leaving Laurie and a seemingly dead Corey. Laurie looks around the room and sees that the back door is open. She goes and closes it and locks it. As we see Michael's now in the house, he reclaims his mask. Corey wakes up for a second and fights with Michael, but Michael at this point ends Corey's part of the story by killing him. Laurie calmly walks and goes into the pantry. Allison gets a call, and it's Officer Hawkins saying that there was a suicide call about Laurie and wants to know if everything's okay. She also sees the radio station on fire, and she now knows that something's up. And now we have our final face-off with Laurie and Michael. They get into a battle in the kitchen. They're fighting back and forth, fighting for advantage, and Laurie finally manages to get some advantage. She gets Michael on top of the island table in the kitchen and stabs him with multiple knives, attempting to pin him down, and then tips the refrigerator over on top of him. She eventually has overpowered Michael and has him pinned down to the table. She shows him a knife and says she's going to end it. She stabs him in the side and he starts bleeding out, and then she removes his mask and says she no longer thinks he's the boogeyman. She knows that he's just a man who's about to die. She cuts his throat, and then Michael, with a final fit of strength, rips his hand off the knife, slicing it down the middle, and grabs Laurie in a chokehold. She's having flashbacks of all her experiences with Michael and yells for him to do it as he's choking her out, and then Allison arrives, breaking Michael's hand off of her, and we see that his hand was split down the middle. And then she joins in on the attack to disable Michael, hurting his arm. And then Laurie takes the knife and cuts Michael's wrist, and he does slowly bleed out. Officer Hawkins arrives on the scene, and she tells him that Michael's dead, but they decide this isn't enough, it's not over. They take Michael out and strap him to the roof of the car, and with police escorts, after some minor objections, and the sheriff does come and approve it as well, they start driving Michael down the street strapped to the hood of the car. And it seems as if the whole town of Haddonfield starts coming out and following them and instantly seems to know what's going on, follows them down the street all the way to the junkyard, where they take Michael's body and they finally destroy it by throwing him into an industrial grinder, and we see Michael's body go into the grinder and be crushed up. And finally, the movie has come to its ending. Allison decides to leave Haddonfield to leave all the struggles behind, and Laurie finishes her book. She says that evil never truly goes away, it just changes shape, and she seems to finally be at peace. Officer Hawkins comes to offer her some comfort, drops off some groceries, and they seem to be planning a trip together. And the movie ends with just some shots of empty rooms around Laurie's house, and we see that she has Michael's mask sitting on a coffee table. And that seemingly is how Halloween ends. So this movie had its ups and downs. I had no idea where they were going to go after Halloween Kills. They hinted at perhaps going a supernatural route again, hinting that Michael seems to be border the line between man and supernatural because of his ability to take extreme amounts of punishment and just keep getting back up and never stopping. And so he disappears at the end of Halloween Kills and he's gone for 4 years. And I would have thought that maybe he would have recovered in that time and he's going to come back in full force. Not the case. Michael's been living in the sewers nearby and he is very much still hurt, suffering from the wounds and damage inflicted in the previous movie. Not to mention that Michael's much older now. He's kind of an old man himself. So he is suffering. He is clearly limping and having trouble getting around and he's overpowered by Corey at one point when he steals his mask. Now, this makes Michael mad and he snaps into action, and he does eventually get his revenge on Corey and kills him. We just are not seeing a full force in his prime Michael Myers here. We're seeing a weakened state Michael, and that gives him a lot of trouble in the scenes that he's in. Although, honestly, Michael's not actually in a lot of this movie. Corey does most of the killing in the movie. Most of the kills in this movie are attributed to Corey. In fact, Michael only kills 3 people in this movie, one of them being Corey. Luckily, I do like that he comes and claims his place as the rightful killer of the movie by taking out Corey. And a lot of things are not perfectly well explained. It's not really clear why Michael lets Corey live in the first scene when he encounters him, or if he just in his weakened state slips up and Corey slips away. But then Corey comes back and they work together. Corey helps him kill the other man, and they also go to the house of the doctor together, and Corey kills the doctor and Michael kills the nurse. So they seem to be working together, and Michael seems to be tolerating Corey to a degree. We're also not sure if he did something to Corey in the scene where he was choking him. We see something in his eye, and we see his flashback. So you almost would think that Michael is somehow infecting him with the evil that is coursing through Michael. But again, I think it just Corey himself goes a little crazy from the treatment that he is receiving from everybody in the town and the events of after killing a child himself. Hard to say, not very clearly explained. And I would guess that Michael gets tired of Corey and eventually does kill him after Corey fights him and steals his mask. I guess that was in Michael's mind, crossing the line. Michael was tolerating him up to that point, but then decided Corey too had to go. This movie is very character driven, and we finally do get some peace from Laurie Strode. We've seen through this new trilogy that Laurie has been tortured, living in a cage or trap, as it turned out to be, for many years, preparing for Michael's return. It has consumed her entire life, and she finally gets her peace. She gets to kill Michael. Michael is undeniably killed and dead in this movie, and then his body is destroyed. So Laurie can finally rest peacefully knowing that there will be no return of Michael Myers after the events of this movie. Myself, as a fan of this franchise, I didn't like the direction they chose to go. I don't want Halloween to end, so I didn't like the idea of a movie called Halloween Ends because I don't want the Halloween franchise to end. I want more Halloween movies in the future. I want more Michael Myers in the future. I just don't like a lot of the choices they made for this movie. I wanted that final showdown between Laurie and Michael. I wanted their story with each other to potentially come to an end and move on, let Michael move on to other things. There are other possibilities to do with Michael Myers, but now he's dead. I mean, that doesn't mean he's gonna stay dead, of course, as we've seen in this franchise and other franchises, it doesn't mean it's the end. I don't like the choice to bring in Corey. I don't like that we have this kid who becomes almost like a little sidekick to Michael, goes a little crazy himself and goes around killing people. I don't like that this movie has kills that are mainly done by somebody other than Michael. I just don't enjoy that. I didn't like Corey overpowering Michael in his weakened state, stealing his mask, and then going around killing people dressed as Michael Myers. It doesn't work for me. That whole part just doesn't work. They should have just had Michael, whether he's in a weakened state or not, come back and resume killings. A Michael Myers movie doesn't necessarily need an incredibly high kill count. The Halloween Kills had a very high kill count. But if you go back to the original Halloween movie, he only killed 5 people in that movie. And it progressed up from there through various sequels and stuff like that. But it doesn't need to be an incredibly high number. You could have had a weakened Michael making his way around, killing a few people here and there. Didn't need to be extreme. We didn't need a new killer brought into the mix, especially not at the end. At least they did make one thing right. They killed Corey so that we don't have to have a worry about a potential another movie with him later. In the end, I suppose it's good that they didn't really end up going a supernatural route. It didn't work out in The Curse of Michael Myers and probably wouldn't have worked out here. Still not sure completely what happened in the cave between Corey and Michael, whether Michael infected Corey with evil, pushed him over the edge, or if Corey had just snapped on his own in that moment, or from the fall, or whatever. But in the end, with Michael, we do learn that he is just a flesh and blood human. He's not a supernatural being. He can take a heck of a lot of punishment and keep on going. But in the end, he's flesh and blood, and he's able to be killed. And one final note, I hope that Laurie's final line saying that evil doesn't die, it just changes shape, isn't an indication that they're going to try again to move forward and do another Halloween branded movie not related to Michael Myers. I feel like that would just be a mistake, and I hope they don't go that route. Overall, I don't think this was a terrible movie. It could have been a lot worse. It could have been a lot better. For me personally, as a fan, I was not thrilled with this movie. It's not the direction I wanted it to go, as I said, but it's what we got, and that's what we'll have to see. We'll have to see if there's anywhere else to go after this, if there's any more Halloween in the future, perhaps another new timeline. Let me know in the comments what you thought about this movie. I know some people are going to like it, some people are going to dislike it. That's the way these go. Taking a quick look at Michael's mask, it is the same mask from Halloween Kills, so not much analysis required there. Michael is wearing the same attire he was in the previous movie. It appears that he's basically just been hiding out for the last 4 years in the sewers beneath Haddonfield. The kill count is kind of divided in this movie. Michael's kill count is very low. He only kills 3 people in this movie. He kills Doug Mullaney in the sewer by cutting his throat and then stabbing him. He was led there by Corey, and Corey helps him with this, although Michael is the one who gets the kill. Michael next kills Deb, the nurse, in the doctor's house by pinning her up against the wall and stabbing her to it. And finally, at the end of the movie, he kills Corey Cunningham. Corey Cunningham is the one who gets most of the kills in this movie. He gets a total of 10 kills. First, he kills Jeremy Allen accidentally by knocking him over the railing, and he falls to his death. He kills the homeless man after emerging from the sewer after his first encounter with Michael by stabbing him in the stomach multiple times. He kills Dr. Mathis by stabbing him in the neck multiple times. And he kills the teenagers who have been bothering him throughout the whole movie. He kills Billy, Stacy, Terry, and Margot in the junkyard. He kills his mother by stabbing. He stabs the radio receptionist to death and then kills the radio DJ by bashing his head up against the table multiple times and then cutting his tongue off with scissors. Those are all of his kills, and the final kill in the movie is made by Laurie Strode, and she kills Michael Myers. So far, the reception to this movie is not great. That may change, the scores may change as it's still early. The movie just came out a few days ago. But on Rotten Tomatoes, the movie has a 39% score from critics, which is a rotten score. It has a 57% from audiences, which is also a rotten score. Over on IMDb, this movie gets a 5.1 out of 10. As I said, this movie isn't terrible, but it's not great either. It's not as good as it could have been, not as bad as it could have been. It's right in the middle for me. That's why I'm going to give this movie a score of a 5.5 out of 10. So, this is my review of Halloween Ends 2022. As I stated, I hope this really isn't the end of the Halloween series. I don't want this to be the final installment in the Halloween franchise. I don't know if it will be, probably not. If there's money to be made, I think they'll continue to make movies. We might go through another dry spell, and we as fans need to prepare for that, but hopefully we will see Michael Myers haunting Haddonfield once again someday. Please let me know your thoughts on Halloween Ends in the comments section. Please like this video and subscribe to the channel, and please keep an eye out for my next video coming soon.